One of the other ways that tidyR helps to work with data is it helps us manipulate data that is missing. We can either drop or replace missing values in a data frame that has missing data in specific columns. And so here is how we can work with that. I have a sample file right here called CO2 capta underscore with NA. I've taken CO2 capta that we have previously seen and have deleted some data in there so that it has NA values. Let's read that data file in. So it's CO2 with NA is the data frame that I want to read CSV file in called CO2 per capita with NA dot CSV. Just making sure I put quotes around that. CO2 per capita with NA dot CSV. If I read that file in, you can see that with the head of the CO2 with NA, again, this is the data file that is in wide form, and you notice that immediately I have some missing values for certain years. For instance, 1981, and in fact, I have it for a couple more years that are just not seen right here. Since this data frame is in wide form, I'm going to be converting it into long form. I'm going to call it CO2 CO2 gathered with NA. And I'm going to be using the gather function of tidyR, and I'm going to say, okay, take CO2 with NA. Do not gather the country column. So gather all the columns but the country column. The key column is going to be year, and the value column is in fact going to be CO2 per capita. If I run this and take a look at the head of CO2 gathered with NA, I have my data frame right here that has been gathered. Now I don't see the NAs in here, but I have CO2 gathered with NA, and if I take a look at the right hand side and try to take a look at the data itself, and so I see it up here. If I see it up here, scroll down, and you'll notice that I start having some years over here, 1981, that has some NA values. If I keep scrolling down, 1988 with some NA values, keep scrolling down, I have 2010 with NA values. So this data file has NA in the column CO2 per capita. And so tidyR, the package, allows us to do some things with this data. So let's say I want to remove the data. I want to remove the missing data. The way I can do that is I can say, I'm going to store this, once I remove the missing data, I'm going to store it into another data frame so I can actually compare the two data frames. So I'm going to say CO2 removed NA. The function to remove missing values from a data frame column is known as drop underscore NA. And so in the data frame CO2 removed NA, I'm going to use the function drop underscore NA, and I have to specify the data frame that I want that has these missing values. So the data frame is CO2 gathered with NA. Additionally, I have to specify the column that holds the missing values in that data frame. In this case, it is CO2 per capita. CO2 per capita is the column that has the missing values. If I go ahead and run this, I'll find CO2 removed NA. And if I take a look at the dimensions of CO2 removed NA, I will find that it only has 152 rows compared to, if I take a look at the dimensions of CO2 gathered with NA, I will find that CO2 gathered NA has 164 rows, while as CO2 removed NA has only 152 rows. And so it has removed those missing rows. I think there were 3 years that had missing 3 or 4 years that, I think 3 or 4 years that had some missing values in them. And so the drop NA function gets rid of them. Now, I might not want to actually drop the missing values, but I might actually want to replace them with some other values. And so tidyR offers a replace NA function that allows us to replace the missing values. And so the way one can do that is I'm going to say CO2 missing replaced is the data frame that's going to hold this. And the function is replace underscore NA. And the data frame that I'm going to look at is CO2 gathered with NA. And I have to specify a function. I have to say the list, I've got to specify the columns that I want to replace. And so I'm going to say in the column CO2 per capita, I want to make sure that the spelling is appropriate. I need to replace it with some values. I can replace the missing values in CO2 gathered with NA and the missing values specifically in CO2 per capita in that data frame with the mean of CO2 per capita. One of the things that is important to do when I'm calculating the mean of CO2 per capita in that data frame that has NA values is I have to specifically set up an argument to say na.rm equals to true. Because CO2 per capita has NA values, trying to directly calculate the mean is going to result in a problem. And by setting na.rm is equal to true, I am ignoring those missing values to calculate the mean. And then I'm putting the mean into CO2 missing replaced. And if I run this and then take a look at the dimensions of this data frame, it gives me 164 rows. And if I actually take a look at the data frame itself, we find for 1981, 4 values, which is the average. I think it was 1988 as well. And so in 1988, I should have, or 1989, these 4 values, and I should have those 4 values somewhere else as well for 2010. Which was the average CO2 per capita. This is how one can replace missing values or drop missing values using the drop underscore NA and replace underscore NA functions in the tidyR package.